Hello and welcome to Decoded by SUAD, a podcast series at Sorbonne University, Abu Dhabi. I'm your host, Shamma, and today's theme is What do AI hallucinations tell us about our intelligence? I'm joined by two colleagues, Sam, who is an associate professor of mathematics and a member of SKY, the Sorbonne Center of Artificial Intelligence, and John, postdoc researcher in the philosophy and sociology department. Thank you both for being here, first of all. Now, my first question for you is, could you please share an experience that you've had personally with an AI tool where you have witnessed the hallucination that made you question the reliability of said tool?
So the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about AI hallucinations is actually citing bad sources. This is a consistent frustration that I always have. And I remember the first time that it happened, I kind of like almost flipped the table because I'm like, what's the use of this if, at least I got to the point where I'm smart enough, hopefully, to be like, all right, well, you're telling me this is the answer to this question, but at least tell me the sources, cite the academic literature. And it cited things, and I remember one of them was like, it sounded like the perfect paper to cite. It was like exactly the topic of the question I had. It was published recently by somebody from a reputable university. And then when I went to go click on it, it doesn't exist, right? And so, what about you?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, what's troubling is the confidence with which it seems to give the answers and cite the sources, which often don't exist. They're just completely made up sources. And also, often when I see one thing I notice is that when I see a connection between two authors, for example, or two ideas that I'm trying to explore, and I type those two things into the search engine, it'll just give me a very boilerplate, superficial explanation of the fact that there's no connection between that's one author, this is a completely different author. Like they have nothing to do with each other, right? So all it's doing is sort of looking at the given sources, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My personal experience with it is less academic and more on I would say a travel, hack. I was using the tool to navigate the system of a foreign country, like the transport system, and it gave me a completely wrong direction. It told me to take a wrong train, and it was very insistent. And I was thankfully double checking with the application of the train, and I, sent it to the actual correct and the destination. And at the end, it was like, actually, yeah, you're right. But it had been, like fighting with me. No, I'm correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have a cousin going to Oman soon, and then I did a search and it invented like another bus service that doesn't exist there, and tried to be like, hey, this is your option. And then we tried to actually get the tickets, and then we're like, wait, there's no stop there. It doesn't exist.
That's very interesting. So what do you think these hallucinations, what deeper issues do they expose? These hallucinations, what deeper issues do they expose within the AI tool or the AI, applications we use?
Right. Well, I think, so hallucinations themselves, at least as far as the way these systems are engineered, they're kind of a logical consequence of the way that they're built, right? So you have this massive amount of training data that it's taken amazing breakthroughs in technology to be able to handle so much data into one single system. And then from there, you're generating output by basically predicting word by word, more precisely tokens, but predicting word by word kind of, and predicting what would be the best next word given everything that this massive model's been trained on. But then also what's necessary is you actually add a little bit of randomness, what we call stochasticity. It's a bit of my research. I use these things called stochastic processes in my research, which is kind of like, you still have for every word you generate a few different options, right, that are plausible, maybe plausible sounding, and you're kind of rolling dice for each one. Of course, it does this extremely fast, but you're kind of rolling dice because you never want to say exactly what's said before. You want to kind of change it up a little bit. But the existence of this inherent random number generation with the idea of trying to use training data and then produce more output actually implies the existence of hallucinations. It's actually an inherent fact of the way that the current systems are engineered. So as far as, viewing the system itself, that's kind of what I see. But
yeah, it's a feature, not a bug of the system.
Or it's just a fact.
Right, it's a fact. And the stochasticity of the system gives the impression, as you say, that it's generating original answers, right? It's like it's saying something original. It's just repeating what was said before, even though it is just, basically calculating the statistic probability that the token is gonna follow the next word and the previous word. And ultimately, what this says is about AI is that it's the model of mind on which it's based is what we call a behavioristic model. In other words, it's reproducing the external behavior, the outward behavior of mind of what an intelligence, a human intelligence, would give off, would present, and so it looks recognizably like some sort of what we would call verbal behavior, right? And when we see a human being explaining something to us or answering a question, we take that as the external manifestation of something going on inside subjectively. In other words, they're thinking, they're reflecting, they're having intuitions, they're making connections, and these sorts of things. But that's not what's happening in AI. And
hopefully, what's happening now.
Yes, exactly. Hopefully, what's happening now, but we can't be 100% sure. But hallucinations are obviously dangerous and frustrating because they can make us get on the wrong bus system or cite false sources. But they're also interesting and almost helpful in a sense because, obviously humans, we hallucinate. In other words, we make mistakes. We can, think we hear the wrong song lyrics or think we hear a sound that's not the right sound, and this sort of thing. But AI and humans don't hallucinate in the same way. We don't make the same types of mistakes. And so that's one of the reasons why when we see an AI which seems to be in a trustworthy way reproducing human-type intelligence that we can rely on, and then all of a sudden we bump up against these mind-bending hallucinations that we're like, that's ridiculous. How could it possibly say that? There's a sense in which it's useful and it's helpful because it reminds us that what's happening is not something that we should maybe trust so easily, and at least it's not identical to what we understand as human beings to be intelligence, right? Because, and one of the reasons for this, and this is one of the things that is the focus of my work, is that it's because it's constitutively incapable of having the kind of subjective first-person experience that is where we get our knowledge from. Like we see the way things are, and then we say things about the way things are. Right? This is not what's happening. Right? It's with AI. It's as Sam said, it's calculating the next token in order to convincingly reconstitute verbal behavior. Right.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is these hallucinations are inevitable, and a human must exercise the discernment when using these applications. I don't think, in my opinion, we've seen a lot of information being put out when these tools and applications were being put out that be careful, this application does make mistakes. We were given this tool, this miracle tool as like an answer to all. Why do you think that is? Is it a marketing strategy, or is it something that we discovered with time?
I mean, I think there are two sides to that answer. The first one is, I think right now the hype and the potential profits that's been sold extremely well, and I would argue for good reason. And really, it's just such a massive race to make it better and better and better. A lot of these, what we're talking about even today would be considered a side issue for AI. But I think that reflects the current state of reality to the audience here. Obviously, this is a big, major issue. But, no, they're going to try to get even better and better and better. The other side is there are efforts to try to limit hallucinations, but most of those are indeed profit-driven, right? People do complain about GPT or Gemini or whatever producing these hallucinations, and they're profit-driven, but again, the fear there is, well, they're just going to try to make the outputs harder and harder to detect as being hallucinations, as opposed to trying to fix what, in my mind, are some of the root or core issues in the way the systems are currently engineered. There is, the last thing, there is research going on, very, very exciting research done by other scientists to change the current architectures to mimic a little bit closer the way that the human mind does cognition. That's some of the research that I'm involved in as well. And to me, that's kind of like the really exciting stuff as well.
It's interesting what Sam says, because about the development of AI in order to try to limit the appearance of hallucination, or to make it seem like hallucinations are not happening, whereas they still are, because there's a sense in which all it does is hallucinate. All AI is hallucination, because it's not in contact with reality. It's a convincing imitation of reality, right? So in a sense in which it's just constantly reproducing this sort of like behavioristic double of conscious experience, right? And so it's not actually describing reality. It's trying to imitate our descriptions of reality, because it's basing itself off of data, text that it finds online that has itself been produced by conscious human beings, right? Also, insofar as there's the problem of it relying more and more on AI-produced data, and therefore, like, this is getting into this negative loop of producing slop, right? Where it's like slop feeding into slop, et cetera. So it's trying to avoid that loop. So it's a sense in which it's kind of parasitic on human intelligence, right? And it needs the production of human linguistic production in order to function, right? But at the same time, I think the reason why, obviously, it's profit-driven, right? So AI companies obviously have a vested interest in minimizing at least the appearance of hallucinations, but also in at least making us think that this is a reliable tool, and maybe it will become a more and more reliable tool to the point where its unreliability approaches zero. But there's a sense in which that brings its own dangers, right? Because there's what I call the epistemic danger on the one hand. In other words, the danger of it giving us wrong information, or this sort of thing. But then there's a moral danger. And the moral danger is that it's going to be so convincing, right? And it's going to be so efficient that we're going to have more and more of a tendency to want to offload our own thinking, our own critical, evaluation of reality, our own creativity to these tools, right? And there's been all sorts of studies that have been done that Sam can tell you about, that about sorts of cognitive consequences of this kind of offloading that we do, diminishing IQs and diminishing neural activity and this sort of thing.
Absolutely. So you don't think the AI tool should, in your opinion, reach that level of correctness, I would say, or what do you think?
I think what we're trying to say actually is we need to be really, really explicit with what the AI should and should not be used for, or what it can and can't do, or what it does and doesn't do. I think there's this rush tendency to just try to slam it into everything. And at the very least now, thankfully, and that's why, in some sense, we view hallucinations as a good thing, because it makes us cautious. It's one of the common things that the common person knows to be cautious with AI. It makes us realize that, wait, we can't just slam AI into everything and use it to solve everything that we do normally in our jobs with thinking. And so, I think it's about making it really, really explicit and realizing that is important human work that needs to be done, which is to say, okay, this is the current state of the tools. Maybe the tool gets better. Of course, it will evolve. But to think hard and be very, very, or as precise as we can be about what these are doing, what they're not doing, and how to use them.
Yeah, I think we need to clearly delineate, above all, between what areas it's safe and healthy and to delegate tasks to AI, and where it's dangerous, where it's not, where this is going to start seeping into or draining the capacities that make us human, right? To make us flourishing human beings who, can maximize our abilities, right, to the highest level and live flourishing lives, right? So I think it's one of the reasons why a humanities university like Sorbonne has a responsibility to really kind of cordon off, sanctuarize, as we say in French, the humanities, right? And make sure that that what's taught in the humanities is not delegated to or outsourced to AI, right? And so that we maintain this ability to, develop our mental muscles of critical thinking, of of being able to just to read a text, maintain our attention spans, be able to synthesize information on our own, and produce analyses that are relevant and original.
Absolutely, yeah. That was actually regarding my next question. Samuel, perhaps you can give us some insights on that. So what do you think a university, its role has in preventing these issues with AI?
Well, I mean, in the short term, something that I've been telling my friends and colleagues is actually to fight against definition creep. So what I've been teaching now for about 10, 15 years, and even in that relatively short time, there's plenty of people with much more experience than me. I've seen kind of like what it means to teach, what it means to learn, and the definition I'm concerned about now is what it means to understand something. I've seen that definition slowly change. That's what I mean by creep. It's slowly changing. This is off of some other work whose, I forget the names now, but basically one of the first areas where I saw this is I have a 9-year-old daughter, and so I am constantly looking up things for her to study, be prepared for the future and things like that. And the way that math education is done now, it's all reduced into little bite-sized pieces, at least math education from what I call K-12 or primary. It's all these little bite-sized pieces which maybe are done during a game or something like that, but you're really making no progress towards what I would consider the heart of what it means to learn mathematics or learn mathematically, which is, it's not so much about getting the right answer, it's being able to generate the argument to get that right answer very precisely and on the fly. And that's, I think, being lost. And really what's happened is what it means to learn math, that's changed. That definition has actually changed slowly as more and more technologies enter the classroom, and AI is even accelerating that. My fear now is even on top of that, AI will even change fundamentally what it means for a student to understand something, because AI is so general that now, instead of understanding something, it's good enough to output something. And that to me is really scary to think about, where you can have a bunch of students who seem to be high achievers that at the end of the day, if the power was to go off and they had no access to AI tools, couldn't argue anything, couldn't defend anything, couldn't rely on their own prowess in order to make decisions. And that to me is very clear. That's not something we want to be headed towards. So that's something that here, I think we can exemplify, both teach it explicitly, but also in our actions, the way we carry out day-to-day operations here. At least that's something that I know myself and our colleagues, we try to do in our classrooms.
Yeah, I think about it as an analogy with, imagine if an able-bodied person never had to stand up and get anything, everything was brought to them, they never walked, their legs would completely atrophy, right? So this is what we're doing with our brains, in a certain sense. Samuel thinks about mathematics, I think about reading, the same thing. Students can read shorter and shorter texts. They're unable to digest or synthesize information, or produce pertinent analyses of what they've read, because they rely on these sort of soundbite-sized tools that have done the synthesis for them, in a certain sense. Just okay, give me the bullet point, takeaway of this text, and that's what they think. Definitional creep.
Yeah,
this is
exactly.
how reading has become defined as well.
You've probably seen that as well, right?
Completely,
I mean, already when I was in school, in university, my philosophy professors was already complaining because I never read complete works in a philosophy 101 course, right? Already at that place, you're reading a few chapters here, a few chapters there, which now even seems like long passages, right? I think now, correct me if I'm wrong, but now you might even just give out 1,000 words here, a 2,000 word passage here, and to me, that's kind of a shame.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think then is for students, how should they use this tool, the AI tool? What limitations should they have, and what uses should they be granted? In your opinion, as teachers, do you think there is a set rule at this point, or is this something that can be explored in the future?
So for me, what I hope students can appreciate is to think deeper about fewer things. Now, I think the hard thing is, what are those few things? That's always the risk, right? We all, nowadays, we want to do everything. And so that is, I think, where having guidance, having a professor, knowing my students' goals and ambitions, knowing their personalities, to try to guide them towards, hey, this is where to use those precious few items of deep thought on, because we can't think deeply about everything, otherwise you're not thinking deeply. But that'll change clearly based off from person to person, from discipline to discipline. But I think if there is like an overall thing, it's to, as far as what AI can help with, is I think it is possible to use AI to help you think deeper about a particular topic, because it is so good at helping you find relevant information. It is so good at helping you reorganize or answering kind of peripheral questions you might have about something. And I use it all the time for that, and I love it for that. If I'm reading a difficult text, especially something out of my field, I can just go to AI, throw it in there, type it, and it's like, oh, okay, that's what he means by here. And I have this term for here. I did that with when I was reading some of your work as we were chatting, because the word like intention, I remember, has a different meaning for in his field as mine. And I say, well, as someone who's worked in cognitive neuroscience and mathematical neuroscience, this is what I mean, and what does he mean? And then can you kind of side by side those? And it did a great job of that to kind of get me through, it just kept me going instead of needing to wait a day, message John, have him answer me, and right. So there are things, so I think for me, it's more of like AI can be a great tool towards promoting deeper thinking about fewer topics.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it's good. It can be useful as a kind of a first step or a way in to topics. It's similar to, but it's kind of a radicalization of what something I experienced like maybe 10 years ago when I first started, maybe 10, 12 years ago, I first started teaching in university, and Wikipedia was still relatively new. And I was confronted with the problem of how to deal with students citing Wikipedia, using Wikipedia as a primary source in their paper, right? So it's the same problem, but it's gone one step further in a sense, or maybe 10 steps further. Because the problem with Wikipedia at the time was that Wikipedia is a text that has no author. Right? No one is intellectually responsible for this text. It's anonymous, and so I would tell my students, you can use Wikipedia, but not the buck has to stop with you. In other words, you can use it as like maybe a quick synthesis and a source aggregator, right? But then you have to verify the sources yourself. You have to verify the information yourself. Wikipedia can't be your last source. And I would say the same thing tenfold about AI, right? Because AI it's the same principle at work as what I noticed in Wikipedia 10, 12 years ago, except it's another level, still further level of anonymity, of remove from the cognitive human responsibility for producing knowledge, right?
Absolutely. Can you tell me, according to you, by the end of 2026, by the end of this year, what will be the most significant change brought about by AI, and what would you like to see emerge?
I mean, I think it's one thing that it's bringing about is it's making us question what it means to be human, first of all, right? It's confronting humanity maybe for the first time with these kind of existential questions, these philosophical questions about what it means to have a mind, what it means to think, right? What's the purpose of education? It's like, why even go to school at some point, right? Because if we kind of follow a certain tendency of our use of AI to its logical conclusion, well, then we can just delegate all our intellectual tasks to it. It will develop our technology for us. It will read our books for us. It'll make our bus schedules for us and this sort of thing, right? So I mean, I see one of the biggest and most urgent challenges of AI in the next year to be how educators are going to respond with new strategies and without hiding your head in the sand, and rejecting AI, but without completely seeing it as a utopia that we uncritically embrace. Yeah.
What about you, Samir?
Well, I mean, I think so. If I remember correctly, the question is, what do you think are going to be the biggest impacts of AI?
And what would you hope to emerge this year?
Yeah. So I think, in order to not be too pessimistic, I think AI will continue to shift the economics of thought output, right? Because what has happened, whether we like it or not, probably not, but it's a fact that the ability to write something that naively looks plausible, the value of that has gone to zero with AI. And that's just a fact, right? That's a reality of the world we live in. And I think this year we will start seeing the economic shocks from that. You're already starting to see that as far as new grads. I've got students who, they'll enter a competition, a programming competition, and then at the end of the day, another team, they're presenting something that very clearly was just pure ChatGPT output. They worked hard, so their figures aren't as tidy or whatever, but to me, it's clear that there's, more thought behind what they did versus the opponents. But then it's up to the judges, and that to me is just a weird. Right, you're going to have more of these types of situations.
You're not judging the output anymore.
Exactly.
You're judging the work that went into it.
Exactly. And I think societies, and if let's talk locally about Abu Dhabi, I think Abu Dhabi is, and our local society here, we're figuring out this year kind of how do we respond to this problem of output versus core understanding that produced the output. And then I think what I would like to see, hopefully, is a kind of a tremendous regression on tech use in general. I mean, AI, to me, has been the evolution of just increasing tech in the classroom in a lot of spheres of society that I think it's actually damaging for humans overall. If you take like a public health perspective of saying, I want my population, I want this society to be as healthy, as flourishing as possible, I think it's not hard to come up with very, very concrete examples of where it's not a good thing. I think this coming, that at least I would love to see that become a really important conversation locally here. And I know there are pockets of it. I know I'm not the only one saying these things, but I kind of view those two as kind of like a big kind of tension as far as this coming year. It's for real.
Well, thank you so much both for being here today.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for tuning in today. This was Decoded by SUAD. See you next time.